Welcome to episode 269 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's July 27, 1928. We're in Tallinn, Estonia against Latvia. Last match of the first Baltic Cup. Latvia win 1-0, and with that, Latvia become the first Baltic champions. Small tournament? Yes, but not a small story, because in 1928, European football is arguing with itself about the Olympics, professionalism, FIFA, regional cups, national identity, and whether the new World Cup should even exist. The Baltic Cup is born inside that argument. But how did we get here? Start with the Europe of the 1920s. The First World War has redrawn the map. Empires have fallen, and new states are trying to make themselves visible. Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, independent, young, building ministries, armies, schools, currencies, flags, and football teams. That matters, because international football is never just sport in this period. It is recognition. A fixture is a diplomatic art. A shirt is a state document with sleeves. And for the Baltic countries, football becomes one way of saying, we are here, we belong to Europe, and we can meet our neighbors as equals. But the Baltic Cup does not emerge in calm weather. It arrives during one of football's most volatile administrative moments. For years, Olympic football has been the closest thing to a world championship. Then 1924 happens. Paris, Uruguay. The Olympic football tournament explodes in importance. Europe sees a South American team not as curiosity, but as revelation, skill, movement, confidence. World football is larger than Europe imagined. Then Amsterdam, 1928. Uruguay win Olympic gold again, this time beating Argentina after replay. In those years, FIFA looks at all of this and sees the obvious problem. The Olympic tournament is prestigious, but it belongs to the Olympic movement. And the Olympic movement is trapped in amateurism. Football is moving somewhere else. Professionalism is already legal or emerging in important places. Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Italy. Central Europe is building serious football economies. Players are being paid. Clubs are organizing internationally. Hugo Meisl and others helped create the Mitropa Cup in 1927, a club competition for Central Europe before the European Cup. The Central European International Cup begins too. Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Italy, Switzerland, a national team competition before the European Championship. Henri Delaunay and Meisl even pushed the idea of a European National Team Cup in 1927. So there's energy everywhere, but not one agreed future. The British home nations are fighting FIFA over amateurism and broken time payments. In 1928, England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland withdraw again from FIFA. Northern Europe is uneasy too. Denmark, Sweden, and Norway have a strong amateur tradition and their own football culture. The Danish FA, with Louis Østrup as one of its leading figures, is not naturally aligned with FIFA's new World Cup logic. Østrup had been FIFA vice president early in the decade. By the late 1920s, that influence is fading. FIFA is moving toward a world championship open to football's real conditions. The old amateur blocks are losing the argument. So the continent begins organizing in layers. Central Europe gets the Mitropa Cup and the International Cup. The Nordic countries get the Nordic Championship. The Balkans are about to create the Balkan Cup. And the Baltics create the Baltic Cup. That is what I mean by Northern European rebellion. Not one single manifesto, not one clean anti-World Cup plot, more like a map of resistance, uncertainty, and self-organization. If FIFA is building a world tournament, these regions are saying, we also need competitions that fit us, our geography, our politics, our calendars, our level, and our identity. Now the Baltic case. Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania had already been playing each other in the 1920s. But until 1928, there is no official Baltic trophy. Estonia had claimed informal regional superiority. Latvia and Lithuania had their own ambitions. So the three Baltic associations turned regular neighborhood football into a tournament. The first edition is held in Tallinn at Kadriorg Stadium from July 25 to July 27. 3 teams, 3 matches, a round robin, simple but symbolically clean. 3 new states, 1 cup. First match is on July 25, Lithuania against Latvia. Latvia win 3-0. That is the opening statement. Second match, July 26, Estonia against Lithuania. Estonia wins 6-0. Arnold Pilak scores heavily and becomes the tournament's top scorer. Now Estonia have momentum, Latvia have points, and Lithuania have suffered 2 hard defeats. So July 27 becomes decisive. Estonia against Latvia, the host country against a team that has already beaten Lithuania. A small stadium, a small crowd by World Cup standards, but a genuine international final in miniature. Latvia score. Estonia don't. So Estonia 0, Latvia 1. At the final whistle, Latvia win the first Baltic Cup. That is the sporting story. But the larger story is that the Baltic states have created a football institution that will outlive almost everything around it. But so what? Well, first Latvia. For Latvia, 1928 becomes an early football identity marker. This is a young national team from a young state winning a regional title against its closest football neighbors. And Latvia take the competition seriously. In the pre-war period, Latvia became the Baltic Cup's strongest side, winning it again and again before the Second World War closes the Old World. Then the Cup gives Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania regular stakes, not just friendlies, not just isolated internationals, but a recurring argument, a local championship, a way to measure progress against the countries who understand your scale. What about the Baltics and the North? The Baltic Cup sits naturally beside the Nordic Championship. There is Northern football world here. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Different levels, different histories, but related problems. Small or medium associations trying to build meaningful international football without waiting for the giants to define everything. That is why the Baltic Cup matters beyond the trophy. It is not only Latvia beating Estonia. It is football infrastructure. It is the Baltic states giving themselves a platform. And that platform feeds into the next international chapter. And if you want that story, go back and listen to episode 223. June 11, 1933, Sweden against Estonia, the first World Cup qualifier. That episode traces how qualification itself was invented when the 1934 World Cup had too many entrants for too few places. And Estonia right there at the beginning, a Baltic team in the first qualifying match in World Cup history. That is the point. The Baltic Cup belongs to the same world as qualification. Small nations entering the larger system, but also building their own competitions so their football lives do not depend only on occasional meetings with giants. And there is a Soviet break. The pre-war Baltic Cup runs through the 1930s. Then history interrupts. Occupation, annexation, war, Soviet control. The independent national teams disappear from the international football map. The Baltic Cup, in its original national meaning, cannot simply continue. That is why its return in the early 1990s matters so much. When Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania regain independence, the Cup becomes more than football nostalgia. It becomes restored statehood in football form. The old shirts are back, the old neighbors are back, the old argument is back. And for Latvia, the later high point comes in 2004. Latvia qualified for Euro 2004, beating Turkey in the playoff and become the first, and still only, Baltic men's national team to reach the European Championship finals. They even draw 0-0 with Germany and Portugal. That is the modern echo of the 1928 story, a small football country insisting against the odds and being visible. Today, Baltic football is still fighting scale, small populations, limited league revenues, hard European competition, player pathways, domestic markets that cannot compete with the big leagues. But the regional idea is not dead. The Baltic Cup continues. Sometimes with guests like Finland or the Faroe Islands. And there are even modern discussions about cross-border Baltic club competition, because the old logic remains. If one small market is too small, maybe three together can build something stronger. Now, what happened to that rebellion I mentioned? FIFA won. That is the blunt answer. The World Cup went ahead in 1930, of course. It was imperfect. 13 teams, long travel, no British home nations, no Denmark surely, many European absences. But Uruguay in 1930 proved the idea could live. Then Italy in 1934 proved it could grow. Qualification begins, Europe participates. The tournament becomes bigger than the Olympic argument, and the amateur resistance loses power. Football doesn't abandon amateurism overnight. The Olympics keep wrestling with it for decades. Some associations keep old ideals alive. Denmark, for example, remains deeply shaped by amateur thinking long after the professional game had made the direction of history clear. But the sporting dominance shifted. Professionalism is no longer something to deny. It is something to govern. And that is the difference between 1928 and the mid-1930s. In 1928, football is still asking, should we create a World Cup? Can Olympic amateurism survive football reality? Do regions need their own competitions? By the mid-1930s, the answers are clearer. Yes, the World Cup exists. No, Olympic amateurism cannot contain elite football. And yes, regional competitions matter, but they now sit beneath, beside, or inside a FIFA-centered international order. That is why July 28, 1928 is such a lovely OTD date. Latvia's win is not famous like Uruguay and Amsterdam. It's not seismic like the Amsterdam FIFA Congress, not foundational like the first World Cup, but it shows the same pressure at work. Football was organizing itself everywhere. World, Europe, Central Europe, Nordic Europe, the Balkans, the Baltics. Everybody could feel that the old loose world of friendlies and Olympic entries was ending. The age of competitions was arriving. Before we go, 3 things to take away from July 27, 1928. First, Latvia's first Baltic Cup win was a small tournament victory inside a huge football argument: Olympic amateurism, professionalism, FIFA authority, and regional self-organization. Second, the Baltic Cup gave Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania something precious: regular football meaning, a trophy, a neighborhoodly rivalry, a way for young states to make themselves visible. And third, the rebellion did not stop the World Cup. FIFA's tournament survived, professional football kept advancing, and by the mid-1930s, the amateur associations had lost most of their political and sporting leverage. On this day in 1928, Latvia beat Estonia 1-0 in Tallinn. Latvia won the first Baltic Cup, and in Europe, arguing about football's future, 3 small nations built a tournament of their own. That is all for episode 269 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. Did you like this story? If so, I ask you to help OTD getting pushed in front of new people. Hit the subscribe button, rate the show 5 stars, share it with your friends. It's the algorithm, guys. And thank you. Tomorrow, go to July 28, 1962, and to the birth of the Bundesliga. See you then.